I recorded nightmarish camping stories, and what followed was unbelievable terror. I never should have opened that door. The moment I did, a chill crept down my spine, a warning I brushed aside as I stepped into the darkness. My life was simple work, friends, the usual grind, but that day, everything changed. The air thickened with a sense of foreboding. Shadows stretched unnaturally, reaching out, as if to clutch at my sanity that it was just a normal evening. The tranquility of my living room wrapping around me like a soft blanket. But then, the stories started playing tales of campers disappearing. Whispers in the woods, ghostly figures dancing in the flickering firelight. Every creak in the house echoed ominously. Every breeze rattled the window like a ghost's exhale. I could smell damp earth, stale and musty like forgotten memories lurking in the corners. Suddenly, the podcast interrupted with a bone-chilling sound. Was that a laugh? No, it was much darker. Something twisted mingling with the rustling leaves outside. Each crackle of the speaker made my heart thump harder, a drumroll echoing warnings of the unknown. The story spoke of the Watcher figure that stalked the flickering flames, peering with hollow eyes. Those poor souls never came back, their final screams swallowed by the night. I looked around. The shadows in my corners seemed to twist, claws reaching for me now. Objects shifted, darted just out of sight. My breath quickened, the pulse in my throat pounding louder than the stories. I could almost feel something lingering, something sinister that thrived on fear. Just as I thought I'd drown in the growing dread, the lights flickered, the room plunged into darkness. I fumbled for my phone, heart racing. The flashlight beam cut through the black air, shadows dancing erratically. I was trapped in a nightmare, and I couldn't wake up. Then I heard Ida low whisper, draping over me like a cold hand. Join us. It slithered into my ears, cold enough to freeze my veins. A figure flickered at the edge of my light, too fast for me to focus. I stumbled back, the breath hitching in my throat, grounding me for a split second. But fear surged back like a wildfire, overwhelming. And then, silence. Heavy. Pressing. A door slammed behind me, the echo reverberating through the emptiness. A scream clawed at my throat. I was no longer alone. Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon, and while you're there, smash that like button. It really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. I should have known better than to invite the darkness in, but curiosity can be a cruel master. With no way out of this nightmare, I tried to muster some courage. My hands trembled as I swept the flashlight beam across the room, illuminating the familiar, yet now threatening, shapes of furniture. Shadows flickered at the edges of my vision, twisting and contorting in ways that defied reality. A shudder ran through me as I recalled the tales of those campers. They spoke of a figure not merely watching, but feeding off fear, an entity that thrived in the blackness, transforming dread into power. I could feel it now, stretching its claws into my thoughts, whispering sweet nothings of despair. It wasn't just a story anymore. It was breathing, pulsating with a life of its own. Join us. The whisper came again, insidious and close, wrapping around me like fog rolling in from an unseen ocean. It felt wrong, intimate, almost beckoning. In response, I squeezed my eyes shut, hoping to shut out the encroaching madness that I tried to gather my thoughts. But my breathing quickened, becoming shallow and erratic. The beam of my flashlight flickered ominously, casting long shadows that seemed to swell and shrink with sinister intent. I was trapped within a cage of my own design, the very walls closing in as if inspired by my fear. Suddenly, a noise erupted from outside, a rustle that crescendoed into the crack of a branch, almost as if it were a footstep in the stillness of the night. My heart plummeted into a void as I peered through the window, but all I saw was the endless weight of darkness swallowing the yard beyond. "Help me," a voice hissed from the depths of the shadows behind me. My hand whipped around to see if someone was there, but all I found was the suffocating air of silence, thickening with each breath. It was a trick, I told myself, just part of the haunting ambience of the night. And yet, the voice was unmistakably human, filled with pure desperation. I turned back to the window, wrestling with my need to flee versus the curiosity clawing at my mind. A thunderous clap of thunder roared through the house, startling me into a spiral of panic. The flashlight flickered one last time before plunging me into absolute darkness. My chest tightened, and I could feel the cold settling in chilled hands grazing my arms, urging me to run. A cry sprang from my throat, only to be swallowed whole as the room seemed to constrict around me. "Join us or be forever lost." The sultry voice echoed now, wrapping itself around my mind as if it sought to invade my very thoughts. Just as I resolved to regain control, the door to my living room swung open, creaking ominously like a mouth pulling back to swallow me whole. The dark figure from the stories slinked into view, its shape dynamic and shifting, as if it carried many souls, each one crying out for release. No longer a tale from a podcast, this was raw, palpable horror solidifying before me. Frozen in fear, every muscle in my body snarled at me to move, to escape, but I was ensnared by dread. The figure loomed closer, its hollow eyes studying me with a hunger that chilled my core. I felt a pull, an unbearable gravity drawing me forward, as though the very essence of my being was being siphoned into the void behind those eyes. And then, a scream, one that didn't belong to me, erupted from somewhere in the darkness, echoing through the room like the painful wail of a lost soul. My instincts screamed to flee, but I couldn't tear my gaze away from that thing, that malevolence that had come to satiate its hunger. In that moment, the very foundation of my reality shifted, and pieces of the world began to crumble into nothingness around me. The walls whispered the names of the missing adventurers lost to the dark, tethered to this horror, and I realized with horrifying clarity that it was asking for me to join them. Then came the silence again, heavy and expectant, just before it happened. The air shimmered in my periphery, and the room pulsed with a new presence, one that felt both familiar and entirely wrong. An arm reached, skeletal fingers clawing towards me, joining the cacophony of whispers that echoed through my mind, and then I understood. I wasn't just facing the ancient horror of the woods. It had been waiting for me to uncover it all along. With a sudden, violent rush, the light flickered back on, illuminating the room. Yet what I saw terrified me beyond comprehension. The walls displayed grotesque reflections of my own face, distorted and trapped in anguished screams. In the center of it all, the figure smiled back at me, a sinister twist on its empty visage, as the floor buckled beneath my feet, and that voice once more, dripping with malevolence. "Stay with you, Sass." I lost my balance, the ground opened beneath me, and I plummeted into an abyss of darkness, my screams swallowed instantly. I could hear them now, the stories. They were coming for me, those lost souls entwined in the shadows, pulling me deeper into the nightmare. And just before I lost consciousness, a single thought formed, chilling me to my core. What if this is just the beginning? I fell for what felt like an eternity, the dark void swallowing me whole as time stretched into a cruel taunt. Finally, I hit a surface, cold, solid, unyielding. Pain shot through my body, yet I couldn't dwell on it. I needed to move despite the heavy fog wrapping around my mind like a suffocating blanket. Gradually, the darkness began to recede, revealing a cavernous space, the air thick with rot and despair. A dim, flickering light hung lazily above me, casting grotesque shadows that danced along the damp walls. There was an undeniable chill settling in my bones that seeped into my very spirit. "Why have you come?" a voice echoed, breaking the silence like shattering glass. That I gasped, pulling myself up only to find a circle of figures, their shapes barely discernible in the dim light. They huddled together, limbs twisted at unnatural angles, faces ghostly pale and eyes void of life yet filled with insatiable yearning. Faces I recognized, campers who had vanished, their laughter forever drowned in the whispers of the dark. They were the very souls I had read about, the names twisted into stories meant to frighten. "Join us," they chorused, their voices like a haunting symphony, layers of cries blending into one grotesque melody. It felt as if their mouths moved in harmony with my racing heartbeat. Be one of us. The thought slammed against my mind like a battering ram. I had become the story. Smothered in dread, I stumbled back, only to find an unseen barrier pressing tight against my shoulders. I was trapped, immersed in their reality and completely at their mercy. Why? I whispered, my throat raw. Why do you want me? Now, one figure broke away from the amalgamation, stepping forward. It seemed more corporeal, as if it still clung to some remnant of the living. Its features were eerily familiar, softly framed beneath layers of dirt and grime. It was a friend I had lost to the woods, drawn in by the same insatiable curiosity. Because you called to us. You awoke the darkness. His voice dripped with sorrow. You sought the truth, and now it is yours to bear. Images flooded my mind. Laughter shared around campfires, the vibrant nature surrounding us, and finally, the fateful night when the shadows had taken them. It gnawed at my sanity, pulling me into the euphoria of their trapped joy, tempered with the bitter taste of their demise. The others began to sway, eyes darkening as the power of their despair washed over me, threatening to consume. You must be aware, they hissed. You must feel the haunting embrace. I turned to the surrounding darkness, barely opaque now, the walls throbbing with a pulse that matched my own frantic heartbeat. I had ventured far and wide to uncover the Furno. It felt like I was the fear. I breathed in desperation, every ounce of willpower channeled into breaking free from those haunted souls yearning for companionship in their torment. Yet, as I writhed against the invisible restraints, the figure of my friend held firm. Stay with us. Why fight it? The truth is liberating. The essence of fear tinged with knowledge that in an instant. They surged forward, their hands stretching out, fingers desperate to touch my skin, as if the warmth of the living could fill the chilling void within them. A sudden surge of energy crackled around me, and I felt dizzy as whispers intensified, morphing into a roar. I was besieged by their memories, their hope, their fears, and their pain. Then a shift. Something tore through, a dark crack unraveling in the air above. It yawned wide, revealing a sight more horrifying than any imagination could conjure. A space sat twisted and warped, stretching into infinity, revealing their truths forged in agony. Faces flickered in the abyss, some familiar, others foreign but all in torment, clawing for escape. Push! The voice urged my friend, thunderous and desperate. Push them back. The intensity rippled through my limbs, igniting something deep within. I realized I could fight. I could resist. A thought ignited a flame in my chest. I would not give in. I willed myself to break free, to claw my way to the surface, to tear away from their grasping phantoms. But as my essence surged, so too did theirs, coalescing into an overwhelming force that threatened to drag me down into that unforgiving expanse. Their ethereal cries crescendoed into an agonizing wail, echoing within the vast darkness as the walls themselves began to shake. Just as I felt myself slipping, a frigid grip snagged my ankle, biting into my flesh, and my heart stopped in terror. I looked down, horrified to witness a grotesque amalgamation of shadows pulling from the depths, crystalline eyes glimmering with malice as they reached for me, dragging me toward that endless void. Join us, the voices intertwined, their insistence filling the cave, swallowing every breath I tried to take as I focused intently, struggling with every ounce of will. I saw something flash above the yawning chasm. A singular entity, a silhouette pulling itself through the currents of shadows. As it drew closer, its presence ignited both fear and recognition deep in my core. And right before I could discern its form, the world erupted in violence, all light extinguished, all sound swallowed, and all hope fell into the abyss with one single word forcefully resonating within me. Help! In that moment of darkness, I realized the truth that remained ghastly in its uncertainty. I was no longer alone, nor was I purely alive. My eyes blinked open to a blinding white, but the brightness felt unnatural, painful, as if a spotlight was aimed directly at my soul. Slowly, details emerged in the Hazia sterile room. The faint hum of machinery, and the sterile scent of disinfectant mingled with something far more rancid. Panic surged as I pushed myself into a sitting position, body shaking violently, heart hammering in my chest. The realization that I was entangled in sheets, bound to a hospital bed, crashed over me like a tidal wave. I fought against my restraints, but they held firm, cold metal biting into my wrists. "No, no!" I shouted, my voice a hoarse whisper. Shadows flickered at the edge of my vision, teasing me with glimpses of dark figures darting just out of reach. "Shoo!" A soothing voice cooed. I turned, horror swelling as I saw a figure in a stark white coat, face obscured by a surgical mask, peering down at me. "You must remain calm." "Where am I? What happened?" I gasped, the reality crashing over me like the chill of the void I had just escaped. "You are safe now. We brought you back," the figure continued, as if rehearsed. "You were lost. We found you wandering in the woods." The tone was calming, even hypnotic, but the fear nestled like ice in my GU. I wasn't lost. My words trailed off into the stricken silence, the memories of the cavern and its monstrous comforts clawing back to the forefront of my mind. The others, my friends, I pressed against the sheets, desperate for movement. Yet they only tightened their grip. The figure remained unnaturally still, their mask reflecting the overhead lights, concealing any semblance of emotion. "Your friends are gone. You must focus on your recovery. They do not leave the forest." Then, abruptly, the lights overhead flickered, momentarily plunging the room into darkness. My heart went still, and the echoes of whispered promises sounded louder, palpable against my skin. I closed my eyes tight and willed it away. "Help me," I begged, though the desperation felt mask-like against the weight of impending doom. "Please, you have to believe me." Just then, the beeping of the monitors around me began to quicken, a frantic rhythm rising in cadence. The figure's eyes widened beneath the confines of the mask, and in that infinitesimal moment, I caught a flicker of something: fear, recognition. A quick adjustment of their hands as they flipped their wrist revealed a strange, glimmering amulet, a small token that seemed to pulse with a dark energy. "Do not fight it," they warned, voice dripping with urgency, uncharacteristically raw beneath the facade. "You must understand where you are and what is required." Suddenly, a screech erupted from down the corridor, cries that merged into a cacophony, a collage of tears and pain that reverberated through the sterile walls. An animalistic growl cut through the air, and the lights flickered once more before plunging us back into darkness. I felt the sheets tighten around me as the shadows coalesced, whispering, "Join us." The figure swayed, as if caught in a tempest, gripping the edge of the bed for support while keeping their gaze fixed on the doorway. "No, not now." Their murmur grew fainter, a mantra to fend off the encroaching horror. The shadows grew thicker, wrapping around my limbs, constricting like a serpent. I thrashed against the bed, the metallic clanking and creaking of the frame amplifying the chaos as all too familiar laughter echoed down the corridor, growing stronger, threatening to engulf everything. "Stay away," I screamed, the sound of my own voice caught somewhere between fear and rage. The amulet dangled precariously in the figure's grip, catching what little light flickered in the room around us, pulsing with an energy that buzzed in eerie harmony with the shadows. With a sudden burst of courage, I yanked at my restraints. The bed creaked and protested as the figure stumbled back, almost losing the amulet, but steadied themselves and gripped it tighter. "Help me," I begged, my voice a raw wail. "You have to let me go." And then, just as I felt my limbs begin to slip free of the tight grip, the wheezing breath of something unnatural rasped through the air. The ground shuddered beneath me, a palpable tremor that whispered promises of despair into my heart. The figure turned abruptly, eyes wide, and I saw a crack of fear break into their facade as the darkness thickened, spilling through the door in liquid shadows, a tangible entity that closed in, writhing and shifting as if alive. Its icy essence clung to my skin, latching onto my fear. "Do not let it in," the figure shouted, but it was too late. A scream rose from my lungs, clawing its way out, drowning the scathing laughter echoing beyond the door, my heart pounding in desperate unison with the piercing thrum of darkness. And then it seeped into the room, surrounding me in a malevolent embrace, seizing control as the shadows coiled tighter, drawing us both into an infinite abyss of terror. As everything spun, my eyes locked onto the glowing amuleth final beacon of hope, now eclipsed in inky despair. I felt myself slipping into that dreaded realm once more, a cold tendril caressing my throat as the whisper grew louder, fusing into a single word that crashed down like thunder in the void of my mind. Join. The air crackled and the lights exploded, leaving only searing darkness where the dazzling room had once stood. And right then I knew. I was never meant to leave. The darkness consumed me, a suffocating blanket that muted my thoughts and stripped away my will. I was endlessly falling, spiraling through an abyss where time lost all meaning, and fear became a companion. It cradled me like a long-forgotten lullaby, haunting yet beckoning. Suddenly, I felt a pull, a weightless force yanking me back towards the chaotic echoes of twisted laughter and wailing cries. My vision flickered to life, the room re-emerging a nightmarish reflection of the one I had just escaped. I was still restrained, bound to that infernal bed, but the sterile walls were now smeared with dark, glistening tendrils that wriggled like living creatures. Above, the light flickered madly, making the shadows dance with malevolent glee. "Help us!" A voice echoed like glass shattering, and I jerked at the restraints, desperate to follow the sound. It was softer this time, eerily entangled with the whispers of the shadows. I strained to see as the sepulchral moans grew louder, and the shadows stretched, expanding like hunger itself. One by one, shapes coalesced from the inky blackness, twisted remnants of my memory as me friends. Their faces were obscured, yet their essence pulsed through the air like a beacon, each one a mark of the lives they once lived. They clawed blindly at the void surrounding them, mouths moving as if they screamed, but no sound escaped. "Help us! We're trapped!" the voice pleaded, breaking through the haze. I squinted into the enveloping darkness, yearning to reach out, to pull them from the grasp of despair. "You shouldn't have come here," another voice rasped, distant yet familiar. It sent shivers cascading down my spine, sharp and cruel that I whipped my head to the figure standing at the edge of my sight, the masked physician. They had morphed into something otherworldly, their form flickering like a candle flame struggling against the wind. The amulet lay cracked on the floor, shards glimmering with a malevolent hunger, and I knew it was the key to opening the door to my companions. But then, a Thuluian screech tore through the air around me, sending shockwaves of terror rippling through my being. I felt it resonate within my bones, a reminder that I had not escaped the forest, and whatever lurked within its depths had decided to follow me into this hell. Suddenly, my friends' faces morphed into grotesque parodies of their former selves, eyes wide and hollow, their skin pallid and sloughing off like the husk of a spider. "We warned you," their mouths formed, silently pleading yet devoid of life. "Oh," I screamed, defiance roaring in my chest. With a surge of determination, I twisted against my binds, each strained muscle throbbing in anger as the air grew thick with their looming presence. "Join us," they cried, their voices crashing like waves against the stony shore of sanity. I felt the last threads of hope fraying as the figure in the white coat lunged towards the flickering shadows, hands outstretched as if to grasp something unseen. But in the next heartbeat, everything shifted. The room warped and twisted, the specters of my friends pulling back as if reeled by an unseen force, their cries fading into a cacophony of torment. The walls pulsed rhythmically, breathing, enveloping me in the nauseating rhythm of dread. "Stop it," I begged, sweat pooling in the juncture of my collarbone. I felt the shadows shift, roiling and swirling like a storm preparing to unleash chaos. And then, as if responding to my desperation, the restraints on my wrists snapped free. Adrenaline surged through me, laughter still echoing in my ears, urgent as I stumbled away from the encroaching shadows and toward the open doorway, the threshold I desperately needed to cross. "Come back," the ghastly voices cried, but I couldn't stop. I wouldn't stop. I dashed towards the doorway, but as I stumbled into the corridor, I realized it was not the way I once knew. It was a winding path, full of endless doors, each one beckoning, promising my friends waiting just beyond the threshold. "Choose." A voice chorused, resonating from every direction, growling a pact. that seeped into my core. Choose to join or choose to leave. My heart thundered painfully against my ribs as I rushed through the hall, the shadows reaching out, fingertips grazing my skin like phantom caresses. Each door I passed loomed ominously, whispers of terrible secrets dancing in the air. Behind each impenetrable surface, I sensed fate intertwined with dread, the lingering essence of lost souls urging me onward and deeper into the darkness. A bright light flashed before me. Was it sanctuary or a trick? I reached for it, but as my fingers brushed the handle, I froze. Silhouetted beyond the glass was a figure. My heart plummeted as I recognized the unmistakable face of one of my lost friends, their mouth stretching into a smile that twisted into something agonizingly wicked. It wasn't the promise of freedom at all. With a chilling realization, I turned away as the door swung wide open. And that's when the shadows lunged, engulfing me in their grip once again. "Join us," they screeched, but I was already falling, slipping beyond the threshold into a darkness deeper than I had ever imagined. The last shred of my consciousness caught one horrifying detail: my friends' faces behind me shifting into horrifying expressions as they screamed one final word, before the darkness snapped shut like a mouth. Forever, and then silence. In the suffocating silence that followed, panic began to claw at me from the inside out. I floated within an amorphous void, my senses trapped in a realm devoid of light and sound. A cold seeped under my skin, twisting my stomach into knots, and I fought against the sensation of weightlessness, an oppressive force pulling me down deeper. Then, the darkness started to shimmer, tendrils of shadow reaching like fingers towards something I could not discern, like molten liquid night swirling with an intent of its own. Muted whispers wove between the tendrils, a language I couldn't understand but that made my skin crawl. It felt like I was in the belly of some monstrous beast, and as if to corroborate this nightmare, a clawed hand breaking through the dark struck my shoulder that I gasped, spinning away only to find myself face to face with one of my friends, or what was left of them. Their eyes were wide, irises swirling with tiny galaxies of despair, their mouth impossibly stretched in a frozen scream. "You shouldn't have left," they shrieked, their voice simultaneous with the cacophony of shadows that laughed viciously. "They'll find you." "Who?" I shouted, panic rising to a crescendo as more faces began to materialize around me, each echoing the same anguished warning with a collective hysteria that pulsed like a heartbeat. The darkness thickened, pulses of unseen energy swirling around me. I felt weight pressed against my chest as another figure surged out from the void, this one wearing the tattered remnants of a camping jacket, eyes sunken and hollow yet blazing with a terrible light of recognition. It was Tom, another friend, his pleas mingling with the shadows. "Help us," he cried, his fingers clawing uselessly at the darkness, trying to crawl back into nothingness. "Don't let them take you, May. They are coming." With every second that passed, I felt time folding upon itself, and a deep chill nestled into my bones. The clenching horror of not only my friends being imprisoned here but the knowledge that I too was becoming part of their eternal torment ate away at me. "Stop it," I screamed, fighting against the encroaching shadows that slithered closer, coiling at my feet. "Get away from me." But fingers made of darkness gripped and twisted around my ankles like serpents. One by one, faces tore themselves from the shadows, their features anguished silhouettes, and their mouths opened in soundless screams, begging for liberation. Their despair wrapped around me, suffocating my thoughts in a grinding loop of their cries. "Let us in," a voice crooned from just behind me, sultry and enticing, as if trying to appear reassuring despite the terror in the air. I glanced back in horror. A figure draped in stitched rags stood at the edge of an inky threshold, its face obscured by a shattered mask depicting hollow eyes that promised nightmares yet unseen. "Join us," it echoed, the shadows at its feet writhing like hungry beasts. "Together we can escape." "Why would I trust you?" I choked back, the tendrils still wrapping tighter, each pulse of darkness seeming to sap my strength like a venomous beast draining its prey's essence. The figure tilted its head, impossibly twisted like the bend of reality itself. "Because they won't stop chasing you," it whispered, the voice now nearly sweet enough to taste. "You're marked, hunted, and unless you give in, They will consume you. Heart and soul, I felt a sharp pang of fear, piercing deep within my core. My companions, those ghostly manifestations of my friends still screaming for help, began to shift and morph into forms that resonated with my own fears. I looked again toward Tom, who screamed, and as he did, his skin folded and sloughed away, revealing a mass of writhing shadows beneath that at least were together. That wretched rapture echoed through the void, desperation clawed at my throat. I couldn't yield to this madness, to this horrific seduction. I fumbled backward, seeking a place of refuge. The darkness around me roared like feral cats fighting over a carcass, each cry pulling at my sanity. "Let us out. You must choose," they chanted, dissonant and chaotic. But before I could bolt away again, a deafening force slammed into me, like a tidal wave of despair crashing over me, melding my friends' cries into a nightmare chorus. The shadows coiled tighter, the air grew thin, and just as I felt myself teeter towards the edge of complete surrender, everything snapped back that I found myself not free. Not at all, but standing in the middle of the forest clearing, the night sky above boiling with black clouds. A rustling sound drew my attention. I turned just in time to see a dark figure emerge from the trees, its stature unnaturally tall, limbs elongated, with hollow eyes that reached straight into my soul. "We've come for you," it hissed through a vacuumed voice. And behind it, shadows erupted from the murky ground, climbing, creeping, rushing toward me like an avalanche of despair. Trapped between despair and a choice, I was left to confront my fate. But as the shadows reached for me, I glimpsed something lurking in their depths, an object, gleaming desperately against the encroaching dark that made my heart stop. The amulet. I lunged toward it, breaking through the veil of shadow, but as my fingers closed around it, the figure lunged as well, and a piercing scream echoed across the forest, my name being torn from countless mouths, all wailing in a symphony of chaos, as I felt the pull of their souls trying to drag me in. "May, we need you," they called, each voice merging into a cacophony of urgency and madness. And just before the darkness closed in, I understood my choice was made, and the weight of it would either damn us all or save them. The moment my fingers grasped the amulet, it radiated warmth that devoured the icy tendrils constricting my body. I felt energy pulse through me, a lifeline that momentarily staved off the shadows surging at my heels. The creature before me hissed, its hollow eyes narrowing with feral rage. With every passing heartbeat, I could sense the frenzied darkness clawing deeper, yearning to reclaim me. But as I instinctively tightened my grip on the amulet, its power surged, and I was thrust backward, away from the encroaching void. I landed hard on the forest floor, my lungs gasping for breath as the shadows paused, momentarily recoiling from the amulet's glow. They writhed restlessly, hissing in a language I felt seeping into my Ursa malevolent hymn of ancient terror. The clearing transformed around me. The trees twisted into grotesque shapes, their branches contorting like skeletal fingers reaching for the tattered remains of my fractured sanity. Glimpses of my friends flashed before my eyes, their distorted visages fading in and out, caught between realms. I could hear their muffled cries, their voices draped in anguish that ignited a fury buried deep inside me. "May, the amulet." Tom's voice sliced through the chaos, pulling me into reality when everything else threatened to slip away. "It's the key. You have to focus." I looked down at the amulet, tarnished trinket etched with esoteric symbols, now flickering with an otherworldly light. My heart raced at the realization. Perhaps this wasn't just a mere object, but a barrier, a connection imbued with ancient magic, the last bastion against the relentless tide of despair. But my relief was fleeting. The shadowy force loomed larger, fueled by malevolence and intent. The figure I had encountered shifted, its form oscillating like a mirage. It smiled a sickening, loathsome grin that unveiled rows of teeth like jagged tombstones. "You think that trinket can save you?" It advanced with impossibly smooth grace, its elongated limbs gliding toward me, each step echoing doom. "No," I screamed, scrambling to my feet, the amulet clutched to my chest. The shadows writhed and snapped, whispering vile secrets that gnawed at my mind like leeches. "You can't have me. I won't let you." The burbling whispers rose around me, swirling in an intoxicating mix of despair and treachery, and with a deep breath, I centered myself. I channeled the essence of my fear, my anger, all that I had witnessed me friends suffering, their relentless pleas for freedom, the overwhelming grasp of the darkness tightening like a noose around my throat. By the light within this amulet, I shouted, my voice defiant against the cacophony, I command you, leave us be. The shadows recoiled, hissing like angry serpents. I swung the amulet toward the creature, feeling its presence ripple through the air. A luminous wave ignited in response to my resolve, pushing back the darkness that writhed at my feet. It enveloped the creature, momentarily halting its advance. But that flicker of victory was short-lived. The shadows, enraged, pursued once more, merging into a monstrous shape that cloaked the woods in a swelling darkness. Faces emerged through the suffocating gloom, each familiar yet twisted and contorted in agony. They reached out, their fingers brushing against my skin, as if trying to reach me from the abyss. Don't leave us. Stay, they wailed, their voices harmonizing with the haunting melody of despair. I shook my head, breathing heavily, feeling my pulse quickening. I can't give in. As the battle of will raged, I was suddenly struck by an overwhelming sense of vertigo. The clearing, the forest, and the shadows vibrated erratically, distorting with every heartbeat. Reality began to peel away like paint from a rotting house, revealing otherworldly landscapes riddled with familiar yet disturbing visions of my friends lost and trapped within this suffocating horror. That I realized then I was losing control, my hold on reality slipping as their cryptic whispers ensnared my mind. Join us, May. You belong here. There's no escape, they echoed, voices swirling like a tempest, drawing dangerous proximity to my resolve. I roared, slashing the amulet through the air as if it were a sword. But as I did, a sudden cold gripped my heart. A ghostly wind surged around me, snatching the very breath from my lungs. The figure lunged forward, its shadowy limbs reaching out faster than I could react. At that moment, the trees crumbled, the ground fractured beneath my feet, and a deep chasm erupted. I teetered on the brink, the amulet glowing bright and fierce in my grasp. But the shadows pulled at my ankles, their claws sharp like shards of glass piercing through. May, one voice cried, a final, desperate call. You must choose now, save yourself or save us. And as I dangled over the void, the very fabric of the forest trembling like a frightened child, I understood the impending plunge would either seal my fate or reclaim them all. And at that precise moment, everything lay in balance, teetering precariously between the tether of life and the seductive allure of the dark. Help us, they cried one last time, the figures merging into one looming shadow. As the amulet's glow began to flicker, threatening to extinguish, I was left with the terrible truth. Could I trust the beats of my heart to guide me? Or was this the beginning of an even deeper nightmare? Just as I was about to leap, the ground gave way entirely beneath me, and I felt myself plummet into a pitch-black abyss, the whispers escalating into a maddening roar. May! The darkness swallowed me whole, and as I fell, the last thing I saw was their faces lost, pleading, and infinitely tormented. Would this be the end, or merely the prologue to a far worse terror? The echoes of my scream reverberated through the abyss as I plummeted deeper into the void. The sensation of falling was replaced by an otherworldly stillness, the kind that burrowed into your bones and coated your skin like ice. Strange tendrils of darkness grazed my body, whispering promises of forgotten truths and ancient horrors that twisted my mind into chaos. Suddenly, I thudded to the ground, not a soft landing, but hard and unforgiving, as if I had struck some unseen barrier. Distant flickers of light danced around me, illuminating grotesque forms that flitted just beyond the edges of consciousness. The landscapes, glimmering with an uncanny beauty yet wreathed in horror, sprawled in every direction. Glacial mountains twisted into spires of malice, and rivers of black oil flowed as if sharing secrets of despair. Wobbly and disoriented, I pushed myself to my feet, instinctively clutching the amulet against my heart. The warmth of its glow was faint now, a mere ember trying to ward off the enveloping shadows. That lingering sensation of dread clutched around me, tightening like a vice, pulsating with the desperation of every damned soul bound to this nightmare. May a soft voice called from the darkness, so familiar yet tainted with anguish. I spun around, scanning the void. In the feeble light, I discerned a silhouette, familiar in its outline but grotesque in its twisted form, the figure of Tom. "You've come back, but why?" "Tom." I rushed toward him, but dread filled my heart when I noticed his eyes sunken, hollow, filled with a haunting despair that sent shivers racing down my spine. He reached for me, fingers grasping as if head lost all strength. "Stay away," I cried, recoiling as the realization hit me like a bloody wasn't entirely himself. Shadows clung to him like a second skin, warping his features until they were nothing more than a ghastly mask. "You're trapped. Where are the others?" "They're everywhere," he rasped, voice cracking as though it had been filleted by fear. "You shouldn't have come. The darkness will consume you, just like it did us." "No, I won't let that happen." I stepped back, raising the amulet, though its glow flickered perilously low. "I will find a way to save Yudo, save all of you. May." He lunged forward, shadows spilling from his mouth, coiling around the amulet in a twisted waltz of despair. "You can't defeat the shadows. They'll break you down and use your fears against you." At that moment, the ground trembled as the terrifying whispers intensified, seeping from the very walls of this accursed realm. Feed us the truth," they shouted, their cacophony writhing like a living entity. I pressed my hands over my ears, fighting against the deluge of torment. Yet their words clawed at the edges of my reason. "Save us, May. Show us the way out." A chorus of voices exploded in my mind, echoing the pain of despair, but their faces, now merged with the Venus mass of shifting shadows, remained unrecognizable. In that instant, the shadows converged, swarming toward me with a ravenous hunger. I stumbled back, feeling their coldness brushing my skin, and caught a brief glimpse of other familiar faces: Lily, Ben, Jess, caught in the throes of torment, each pleading silently for a release that I wasn't sure I could give. "Stop," I begged them, my heart racing as despair threatened to suffocate me. "You have to fight. I can help you." Yet their moans turned to laughter, hollow and mirthless as they swarmed closer, jaws stretching impossibly wide. "You seek salvation, yet you are just a pawn in their game. Join us, May. Embrace the darkness, let it cradle you." I closed my eyes, desperately summoning every ounce of courage within me, but the shadows clawed through my defenses, stripping away the layers of dignity and hope. It felt as though the very fabric of my soul was being unspooled from within, thrumming with agony as the grips of despair grew tighter. But just as all seemed lost, a surge of clarity broke through the darkness of faint memory of laughter, joy, and friendship, bright enough to pierce the veil of horror surrounding me. The amulet surged momentarily, illuminating the faces of my friends against the forsaken backdrop. "May," Tom's voice echoed sharply. "Don't listen to them. Remember who you are." It was enough to fuel the amulet's spark ignited within, pushing back against the encroaching shadows. I raised it high, feeling the energy, the warmth returning to me. "You will not take me. I command you to release them," the shadows screamed, their cries morphing into a guttural roar that shook the very ground beneath my feet. Yet, even as the light reclaimed its radiance, the writhing forms transformed into an even more horrific amalgam, a massive creature, forged from their anguished cries, looming before me with a face shifting and shifting again. An abomination I couldn't comprehend. "You can't escape," it bellowed, its voice a cacophony of every tortured soul that had ever dwelled in this nightmare. With the flickering glow of the amulet hardening like steel in my grasp, I prepared to confront this hellish entity. Yet before I could move, the shadowy mass lunged, and in a terrifying flash of darkness, I was enveloped completely, lost to the chaotic memories swirling around me, drowning in a sea of despair, my friends' faces morphing into grotesque parodies. But it was in this darkness that a chilling realization gripped my heart. This wasn't just a fight for survival. It was a battle for my very soul. The eyes of countless souls bore into me, filled with pleading and rage, no longer visible but eternally felt, and as their voices rose to a deafening crescendo, I braced myself for what was to come, knowing I may be forced to make the ultimate sacrifice to escape this nightmare. Just as the weight of despair threatened to pull me under, a final fragmented scream echoed, chilling me to my core. "May, you must!" And in that moment, the ground beneath me shattered completely, plunging me deeper into a maelstrom of darkness, where unimaginable terrors awaited, and I realized too late I had unearthed something darker than I could have ever envisioned. The void swallowed me whole, spinning me into a whirlpool of cascading shadows. What had once been a solid ground morphed into 1,000 wailing specters, each vying for attention, grasping at me with insubstantial hands that felt like ice over my skin. I could hear their sorrowful cries mingling with the phantom laughter of my friends, all echoing the same haunting question. "What price will you pay to escape?" The shadows morphed once more, coalescing into murky pathways illuminated by an eerie glow, beckoning me forward like sirens on jagged rocks. Desperation clawed at my throat as I staggered toward the light, each step intensifying the oppressive weight on my chest. I stumbled forward through a corridor filled with images, snapshots of our joyous camping trips, the campfire crackling, our laughter echoing against the backdrop of the relentless woods. But beneath each veil of happiness, a flicker of darkness danced. "Look at us," a voice whispered just beneath the surface, too familiar yet steeped in a sickly sweetness. It was Tom's voice, or at least a husk of it, beckoning me to delve deeper into the nostalgia. We were so happy before the shadows came. I cringed at the memory, realizing how naive we had been, but the warmth of those slipstreamed moments pulled at my heartstrings like tendrils reaching from the abyss. Compelled, I let the light guide me, drawn toward the promise of safety even as the shadows hissed in protest, their voices writhing around me, pleading with me to turn back. But just as I stepped closer, the images erupted into horror. The laughter shattered, replaced by chaos and violence. I witnessed the camp engulfed in flames, my friends fighting against dark figures that darted from tree to tree. Felt like shards of ice stabbing deep into my core. Every scream echoed, wrapping around me like a noose. "No, no," I shrieked, collapsing to my knees. "This isn't real. You can't trap me like this." But as I cried out, the echoes transformed. The splintered laughter shifted into that of mocking glee, warped and demented as the figures became more menacing. Shadows twisted into claws and teeth, rippling toward me. I felt the primal urge to flee, to get as far away as possible from their grotesque forms. Yet deeper down, a darker fear, one bred from the horrific truth of loss, took root in my heart. What if I was the reason? What if it was my fault that they had suffered? The ground beneath me trembled, sending wave after wave of shadowy power, threatening to pull me under. I barely managed to stagger backward before a creature, gaunt and grotesque, clawed its way out of the encroaching darkness. It stood tall, each limb twisting at impossible angles, its head cocked unnaturally, displaying a grin that combined both malevolence and an overwhelming sense of anguish. The shadows writhed around it, a dark tide unfurling, whispering secrets of despair into the very fabric of my being. "They will never find you, May," it rasped, voice melding with a cacophony of agony. "Your fear is what binds you here. Words can't save you now." As the creature advanced, time felt as though it slowed, its long fingers outstretched, reaching toward me with an insatiable hunger. My breath caught in my throat, panic surged, and for a moment, all remnants of bravery drained away, leaving only the raw essence of terror and desperation. I instinctively reached for the amulet, last vestige of light I had left. But as I held it in my trembling hands, it felt cold, dim. The shadows chortled around me, feeding off my fear, pulsing like a living heartbeat. "You think that trinket can save you?" The creature's laughter reverberated in my mind, filling the void with torment. "Let it go." Made out 1,000 memories shifted within my consciousness, me friends' faces flickering in and out like phantoms of guilt. Was it truly my fault? In that instant of hesitation, the shadows closed in tighter, warping the space around me, growing heavier, suffocating me within their grasp. Suddenly, from the periphery of my vision, a new form emerged, flickering like static on an old television. It was Lily, her expression twisted between fear and determination. "May, you must remember," she cried, her voice cutting through the chaos, a lifeline in the storm of despair. "They can't control you if you embrace your truth." But, as I opened my mouth to respond, the creature lunged. The gleaming shadows surged like a tide, and with a sickening crunch, I was enveloped entirely, thrown into a realm where my worst memories played out in ghastly detail as visions of tragedy and loss spiraled around me. The overwhelming cacophony of my friends' screams echoed through the abyss. One last cry rang out amongst all the others, chilling me to my very core. "Save yourself!" And in that gut-wrenching moment, gravity itself shifted me, surroundings warped, and I felt the ground disappear beneath my feet, plunging me deeper and deeper into the heart of darkness, where the consummation of reality and nightmare would test the very limits of my sanity. Alone and aware that my resolve was fading, I grasped the amulet one last time, praying it would steer me back toward the light, all too aware that there were far worse fates than losing one's soul. But just as the darkness tightened its grip, I felt a fleeting flutter of acceptance within the swirling void, and a bone-rattling voice whispered the unthinkable. "What is your truth, May?" Then, without warning, the darkness erupted in a blinding flash, and everything ceased, only to leave me hanging in an aching silence, hovering on the cusp of either salvation or irrevocable doom. I woke up gasping, my heart pounding like a war drum against my ribs. The blinding light faded around me, revealing a pale, sterile room drenched in the oppressive silence of despair. I could still feel the lingering effects of dread that raked at the edges of my mind, reminding me of the horrors I had battled, the nightmare of twisted shadows, the pleas of lost friends, and the stark terror of facing something larger than myself, something that had woven itself into my very essence. Slowly, I adjusted to the dimness, my breath shaky and unsure. The walls appeared once again as they had in that sinister dream, cold and unyielding. And now I realized I was not alone. Figures hovered across the room, forms obscured by the brilliant light which now flickered oddly, casting long shadows over the floor. My heart twisted as the realization grasped. Muffled voices rose, weaving together a haunting symphony of anguish. Shadows darted around the periphery, taunting me with the agony of the lost. "Wake up, May." The voice pulled me away from my spiraling thoughts, cool and clinical. I turned to see a figure in a stark white coat looking down at me, their face familiar yet shrouded. "You've been in a fugue state for days. We were worried we'd lost you." As they leaned closer, I couldn't help but notice the flicker of their eyes, an unsettling shimmer that spoke of secrets buried in despair. Suddenly, the walls around me breathed, warm and alive with memories that clawed at my throat, choking me. I struggled against the restraining sheets. Tendrils of panic twisted my stomach as I saw the shadows coalescing at the edges. A torrent of familiar faces creeping from the corners, twisted into masks of torment. On instinct, I snatched at the base of my neck, feeling the cold touch of the amulet buried beneath the fabric of my hospital gown. My breath quickened. "No, you don't understand. They're still out there. You have to let me go." The figure shook their head, a faint smile betraying an unnatural warmth. "There's nothing out there except what's already within you." The whispered words unspooled my resolve. "You need to face the truth. May, embrace it." "Truth?" I gasped, panic spilling from my lips. "Do you mean the truth of what happened? Of them?" I pointed wildly at the walls, where distorted shapes of my friends writhed within the shadows. "They're here. They're coming for me." And that's when it hit me like an icy bolt. The faces plastered across the walls, their eyes wide and pleading, belonging not to merely a lost memory, but also a mingling of reality I could no longer separate. The hospital room shifted. The sterile room transformed into a warped version of the forest, shadows climbing the walls, claiming the space as a twisted abode. It was caving in, a cyclone of fear and regret consuming everything around me. "You were meant to stay," the figure in white remarked, voice rippling like a chorus of fingernails against a chalkboard, the mocking tone painful against my ears. "You're part of them now, Dano." I screamed, summoned every grain of my willpower. The amulet pulsed against my chest as I willed myself to push away the suffocating darkness. "You can't take me. You can't take us." In an instant, the figure lunged forward, and the room erupted in chaos. The light flickered violently, shadows rising as though released from their imprisonment. My friends appeared, slashing through the darkness, their distorted forms intermingling with the encroaching figure looming over me. "Join us, May," they repeated, voices layered in anguish, a chilling echo of the pact I could not break. "It's too late for us." Tom's face emerged, agony etched across his features. "But not for you." I felt the weight of their collective anguish, felt a tremor course through my veins, but at that moment, the flicker of the amulet blazed brighter, illuminating the room and seeping through the shadows, revealing truths buried deep beneath layers of horror. "You're all still in the darkness," I breathlessly realized, calling out to each obscured face as they shifted uneasily. "Save us," they cried, more a demand than a plea, crumbling against the encroaching presence as I fought to hold onto my grasp of reality. The whispers morphed into howls, crashing against my consciousness, each tortured soul fighting against the grip of the shadows. I screamed, clutching the amulet once more, its glow racing through my body. "You will not have me," and in an act of raw desperation, I hurled it through the air, feeling it imbue the darkness with light that burned bright and fierce. The shadows recoiled, shrieks of outrage erupting as they were engulfed in the amulet's radiant glow. But even as I watched the darkness caving in upon itself, I felt something ominous snake through my heart, a disquieting thought straining against the edges of my mind. "You won't escape," the dread figure shrieked as the shimmering light tried to pull my friends toward safety. "They will always return." As the echoes filled the room, the walls began to crack under the strain of my defiance, revealing glimpses of forgotten truths. I could see it then, the dark underbelly of each shadow, each anguished crilipant, malignant pieces of what once was. The truth seeping through in visions trailing behind one another, hearts beating wildly against the cadaverous memories. I was one of them now, but I was not lost. Not yet. "You think you're free, but you are chained to your pain," the entity spat, as a shadow surged towards my friends, turning them to monstrous forms that stood in stark contrast to the laughter I once cherished. "They will never let you go. They feed on your fear and unacceptance." I stood firm, clenching my fists, my cracked voice roaring against the din. "Not any longer. I will be my own light." As dawn broke through the window along the horizon of my truth, I felt the strings binding me to the darkness begin to unravel. With each strand that snapped, I felt a weight lift, the ghosts freed, their faces finally emerging from the layers of shadow as the amulet's radiance enveloped the room like the dawning sun. I turned to my friends, their longing eyes of solid despair flared with hope. A collective symphony of wills intertwined as we reached out for each other, immersing ourselves in the warm embrace of light. When the darkness finally receded, the figure that had loomed over us melted into nothingness, and the laughter of my friends returned, now clear, echoing through the remnants of shadow. I blinked against the brightness of reality, horrified yet euphoric at the liberation of our shared pain. But then, doubts rippled through me once more. As our hands intertwined, the world around us trembled, and I heard it whispers slithering through the corners of my mind, "This is not the end." And just like that, the walls spilled in on themselves, an unrelenting tide of shadows lurking just beyond our newfound light. "You are marked," they hissed, seductive shadows teasing through the cracks. "You can never truly escape." And even as I held my friends close in that sliver of dawn, I trembled with the dawning realization that the darkness that swirled around us was not gone, merely waiting, lurking beneath the surface, whispering secrets of despair. "Be careful, May," one of my friends murmured, their grip tightening. "This may just be the beginning." Somewhere deep within me, I could feel the echo of the Shadowsa lingering sense of dread pulsing like an invisible heartbeat. And I knew, no matter how far I'd come, the darkness would always linger, just a step away, waiting for my fear to summon it once more into this world.